Hello, Void Wanderers. Sit tight in your chairs and let's get into 3 true stories about mimics. I want to start by saying I'm not someone who believes in monsters. I've been camping solo since I was 19. I've done trails in the Rockies, the Smokies, parts of the PCT. I've had close calls with wildlife. I've been lost. I've been cold and wet and genuinely scared in the outdoors. But I always had an explanation for it. Until the Ozarks. This was about 3 years ago. I'd done this particular stretch of the Ozark National Forest twice before, so I knew the terrain. It's remote but not extreme. The kind of place where you might go 2 full days without seeing another hiker. I was going for a long weekend, Thursday through Sunday, just to decompress. Work had been brutal. I needed silence and trees and fire. The first day was perfect. I made camp near a creek I recognized from my last trip, set up my hammock, cooked over the fire, went to sleep early. Normal. Good. Day 2, I pushed further north on the trail than I usually go. Came back to camp around 4 in the afternoon with tired legs and a clear head. That was the last normal part of the trip. I was cooking dinner when I heard it. My name. From the tree line, maybe 60 or 70 feet behind my camp. In my mother's voice. I need you to understand something. My mother has a very specific way she says my name. Not just the sound of her voice, the cadence. The way she drops slightly at the end. The shape of it. When she's calling me for dinner, when she's worried, when she just wants to check in. I have heard that voice my entire life. I would know it anywhere. This was that voice. My first reaction wasn't fear, it was confusion. My mother lives in Ohio. I was in Arkansas. My brain just rejected the input completely. I thought, okay, I'm more tired than I realized. I almost laughed at myself. I went back to stirring my food. Then it came again. Same voice, same cadence, but this time it used my nickname. The one only my family uses. The one that's not on any of my social media, not in my email signature, not something a stranger would ever know. I put down the spoon and stood up. I didn't call back. I don't know why. Instinct, maybe. Something in me said, don't. I turned toward the tree line and stared into the dark between the pines. It was still light out, golden hour, but the woods were already getting dark underneath the canopy. Nothing moved. Then it came a third time. Exact same words, exact same tone, word for word, syllable for syllable, a perfect copy of the second call, like a recording being played back, like something had stored the audio and was simply running it again. That's when my skin went cold. I have heard my mother's voice react to things my entire life. It rises and falls. It adjusts. This didn't adjust. It was a loop. And whatever was making it was standing in those trees 60 feet from me, waiting for me to respond. I didn't pack up fast. I packed up carefully. I let the fire die on its own. I broke down the hammock quietly. I stuffed everything into my pack methodically because I knew if I started rushing, I would panic. And panic in the dark in the woods would get me killed. The voice came 2 more times while I was packing. Same words, same cadence. It never got closer. It never got farther. It just waited. I hiked out in the dark with a headlamp. 3 miles to the trailhead. I've done that trail a dozen times. I knew every turn. For the first mile, I heard footsteps behind me. Not close, maybe 30 or 40 feet back, matching my pace. When I slowed, they slowed. When I stopped to listen, they stopped too. I never heard breathing. I never heard branches snapping or undergrowth pushing back. Just soft, careful footsteps in the leaf litter, keeping perfect distance behind me. At the 1 mile mark, they stopped. I don't know why. I didn't stop to figure it out. I got to my car, threw my pack in the back, and sat in the driver's seat shaking for about 10 minutes before I could make myself turn the key. When I finally did, when the engine turned over and the headlights came on, and I was inside something with locks and glass, I heard the voice one last time. From the tree line at the edge of the trailhead parking lot. But it wasn't my mother's voice anymore. I can't describe what it was. Not accurately. It used the same sounds, the same syllables, like it was still trying but had stopped caring about getting it right. Like a machine winding down. Whatever quality makes a human voice sound human was gone. What was left was just sound, shaped vaguely like a name. I drove 4 hours before I stopped. 3 weeks later, I was on the phone with my mom. Normal Sunday call. And at the end, completely unprompted, she said, "I had the strangest dream about you a few weeks ago. I was calling for you in the dark somewhere and I couldn't find you. You wouldn't answer me." She didn't know I'd been camping that weekend. I hadn't told her. I told her the dream sounded scary. I didn't tell her the rest. We were 4 people, and nobody talks about that trip anymore. Not because nothing happened, because we all know exactly what happened, and none of us have figured out what to do with it. You don't bring up something like that at Thanksgiving. You don't text about it. You just let it sit there between the 4 of you, and hope it eventually calcifies into something you can live with. It was the summer after our junior year of college. Me, Danny, Priya, and Marcus. We'd been close since freshman orientation, the kind of tight that only forms when you're all new somewhere at the same time. The Black Hills trip was Marcus's idea. He'd grown up in South Dakota, wanted to show us the good parts before we graduated and scattered to different cities. We drove out in Danny's truck. 3 days, 2 nights, a trail system Marcus knew well. Day 1 was genuinely beautiful. The hills have this strange geology, open sky, nothing like the East Coast forest the rest of us were used to. We made camp in a flat clearing off the main trail, maybe a mile and a half from the trailhead. Good fire, bad camp food, Marcus doing his terrible impression of a park ranger. Easy night. Night 2 is when things shifted. We'd been around the fire for a few hours. Late, maybe 11 or midnight. Priya had already gone to her tent. Just the 3 of us left, mostly quiet. The kind of comfortable silence that only happens with people you've known long enough to not need to fill it. Marcus said he needed to use the bathroom and walked off into the trees. We had a rule on the trip. Don't go more than 50 feet from camp, stay within earshot. He took his headlamp and went left, into the pines behind his tent. 5 minutes later, someone walked back into the firelight and sat down. Sat down in Marcus's camp chair, on the wrong side of the fire. I noticed it first, but I didn't say anything. I told myself I'd mixed up which side he'd been on. Danny was poking at the fire and hadn't looked up yet, and the person in the chair was Marcus. Same jacket, same build, same face when the firelight hit it. Danny looked up and said something to him. A callback to a bit we'd had going since day 1, our kind of shorthand, the sort of reference that requires 3 years of shared context to even parse. The thing in the chair smiled, but didn't respond to it. Just smiled, a beat too long, staring into the fire. I looked at Danny. Danny looked at me. Neither of us said anything out loud. It sat with us for maybe 20 minutes. It answered direct questions, but kept answers short. It didn't initiate anything. It didn't have Marcus's timing, that easy back and forth he always had. Everything came back a half-second late, like something processing and then generating a response. We both kept conversation minimal. I think we did it instinctively, neither one of us willing to name out loud what we were already both feeling. Then the real Marcus walked back into camp. He'd gone further than he meant to, he said. Lost track of the 50-foot rule. He looked at the chair, his chair, on the wrong side of the fire, and looked at us and said, "What?" We looked at the chair. It was empty. We hadn't heard anything stand up. We hadn't seen it move. The fire hadn't shifted. There was no sound of footsteps, no rustle of brush, nothing. It was just gone. The three of us stood there in the firelight and nobody said what we were all thinking. Danny said he was tired and went to his tent. Marcus sat down on the correct side of the fire and stared at the coals. I watched the tree line for another hour before I finally gave up and got in my sleeping bag. In the morning, we broke camp and left without finishing the third day. On the drive home, about 2 hours in, Danny said quietly from the back seat, "That wasn't Marcus that sat down." Nobody disagreed. Marcus said just as quietly, "I know." We never talked about what it was doing during those 20 minutes, what it was waiting for, whether it was learning something, taking something, or just watching. Whether the real Marcus came back exactly the same as he'd left. I think about it more than I want to admit. What would have happened if Danny had pushed on the inside joke and it had failed the test? Whether it knew it had failed. Whether that's why it left when the real Marcus came back, or whether it left for a different reason entirely. Marcus seems fine. He's the same person I've known for years. I just notice sometimes that his timing is a little different than it used to be. A half second late. Probably nothing. My dad is the one who taught me to camp. He's the kind of man who reads trail maps the way other people read newspapers. He knows what cloud formations mean for afternoon weather. He can make a fire in the rain with 2 matches. He's been in the backcountry his whole adult life. He does not spook easily. I'm telling you that so you understand what it meant when we got back to the car that day and he sat in the driver's seat and didn't put the key in the ignition for a long time. Just sat there, looking at the windshield. I was 15. Dad and I did a trip every summer, usually a long weekend on whatever section of the Appalachian Trail he wanted to show me that year. This one was in eastern Tennessee, a stretch neither of us had hiked before. 3 days, just the 2 of us, no other hikers for most of it. The first 2 days were good. We covered solid ground, made camp early both nights, had the kind of conversations that only happen when you're out of cell range and there's nothing to do but walk and talk. I remember thinking it was one of the best trips we'd done. Day 3, we broke camp after breakfast and started back toward the trailhead. 6 miles to cover. About 2 miles in, the trail forked in a way that wasn't clearly marked on our map. Not unusual on the AT. Plenty of informal offshoots, social trails, old hunter paths. My dad studied the map, studied the fork, and said we'd split up to scout. He'd take the left branch, I'd take the right. 100 yards each, see which one looked like a maintained trail. We'd whistle to signal each other and meet back at the fork. I went right. The path curved and I lost sight of the junction behind me. I went about 80 yards, decided the trail was petering out into a deer path, turned around to head back. That's when I heard my dad, from somewhere ahead of me, further down the right side path, away from the fork. His voice, his exact voice, the way he said my name when something was wrong, that specific raised pitch at the end he couldn't fully control no matter how calm he tried to be. My first instinct was to call back and follow. I actually took steps toward it, but something made me stop. The urgency was wrong. My dad is not a panicked person. Even when something's actually wrong, he stays measured. He thinks before he reacts. That's just who he is. I have never in my life heard him sound desperate. This voice had his words but not his restraint. It called again, louder, and the desperation in it was like a performance of what someone thinks a worried father sounds like. Not what my actual father sounds like. And underneath that, if he'd gone left at the fork, how was his voice coming from ahead of me on the right? I turned around and walked back to the junction. Fast. Not running, but close. My dad was already there. He'd come back earlier than he'd planned. He was standing at the fork completely still, and when I came out of the trees, he exhaled like he'd been holding it the entire time. He said, "You didn't follow it, did you?" I told him I'd started to, then stopped. He nodded slowly. He said he'd heard my voice from somewhere behind him on the left path. Not ahead, behind, back toward the fork, from the wrong direction. Calling him by the name I use when I'm genuinely scared, the informal version I only use when it's serious. Telling him I'd found something and he needed to come see. He'd turned around immediately. Said the context was wrong. I'd gone right. My voice was coming from behind him on the left. The geometry didn't work. So he came back. Something had put itself at the end of each path. One copying his voice, one copying mine. Both of them waiting for one of us to be alone and out of earshot before committing to it. We stood at the fork for a minute without speaking. I asked him what he thought it was. He said he didn't know, and he didn't want to find out, and we were leaving. We took the main trail back and didn't stop for breaks. About a mile from the trailhead, my dad paused and looked behind us. I looked too. At the edge of the trail, in the soft ground where the path bordered a wet drainage ditch, there were tracks. Something had been standing there watching us walk away. Not boot prints, not any animal print I recognized. Large, irregular, pressed deep, like whatever made them had been standing in that spot for a long time and was very heavy. My dad took a photo. When we got home, he printed it and showed it to a ranger he knew personally, a guy he'd done trail work with for years. The ranger looked at it without speaking for a while. Then he asked where exactly we'd been. When my dad told him the section, the ranger handed the photo back and said to avoid that stretch of trail for a while. Didn't say why. Didn't ask any follow-up questions. We sat in the parking lot for a long time before my dad started the car. We've done the AT every summer since. Different sections. My dad still scouts trail forks when the map isn't clear. He still goes ahead and sends me the other direction. But now, every single time, before we split up, even for 2 minutes, even within sight of each other, he looks at me and says the same thing. Don't answer anything that calls your name until you can see my face. He's never explained why he started saying it. He doesn't need to.